Hi, folks. Don't sweat it. It's just not going to be me today. I am going to be joined by Amanda from Curve, but I've started this thing where I like to kind of highlight some of the news stories that I've seen over the past 24 hours. And as my great producers, Tobias and Hannah, said, it's never nice just to have someone else sitting on the screen staring at you. Well, waiting for you to finish talking. So we're going to fade her in to this in a minute. So let's start. Let's go ahead and kick off. Welcome, everybody. This is the 35th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. I'm Sam Maule, 11FS Managing Director, North America. I'm your host for this little series that we do. Do let us know where you're watching from around the world. We love hearing Pakistan, Philippines, Egypt, Saudi, Istanbul, Dublin, Nigeria, Canada, London, Ireland. I think we've covered just about everywhere so far. Please also share this stream. Hit that little share button. Send it out to everybody you know. Hit the like button. And please subscribe to 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss a show. As always, before we jump into our conversation with our guests, I'd like to highlight 3 news stories I found interesting over the past 24 hours. The first one, our own Simon Taylor, our boy wonder from 11FS. He wrote a great blog piece on the latest news about Shopify. If you weren't paying attention yesterday, it was Shopify all day long with the announcements they had. So Simon wrote a blog piece. He noted that Shopify has announced a business debit card called Balance that buy now and pay later. So there's your installments, an AI-powered fulfillment network, and integration with Facebook and Instagram for shops. So now Shopify is basically Klarna, Brex, Amazon, and a little bit of Walmart. So great blog piece. Read that. Next one was in TechCrunch. They had an article on the U.S. challenger bank Aspiration. Aspiration, the LA-based fintech based on conscious consumerism, raised $135 million US. So my congratulations go out to Andre Cherney and team. Andre's a good guy. And finally, also from TechCrunch, Monzo co-founder Tom Bloomfield moves from the UK CEO role to president of Monzo. The current US CEO, T.S. Anil, will become the new Monzo UK Bank CEO, subject to regulatory approval, and for now will hold both the UK and US roles. The interesting thing about Anil is he previously held executive roles at Visa, Standard Chartered Bank, and Citi. So a ton of banking experience. I think as a founder, and Amanda and I will probably hit on this, one of the most sought after skills as a leader is knowing what you are good at and what you're not, or maybe where you excel, and understanding when to bring in help and when not to. So personally, for Tom and team, good job. He's done a fantastic job with Monzo. So with that, let's bring in our guest. Today, we're happy to be joined by Amanda Orson. She's the head of North America at Curve. It's a UK-based Curve launched in the US in February 2020, right before the pandemic started. Today, we're going to chat with Amanda about her experience in launching a brand in a new part of the world during an international crisis, because I know you planned this, Amanda, and well done. So Amanda, before we jump in here, I'm not a massive fan of LinkedIn recommendations. It's one of those, but every now and then, some of them are really good. So this is the first part of Eric Nagel's write-up on you. So go ahead and be embarrassed. You ready? Although she may not like it, I call Amanda the most interesting person I know. Her life experience could fill a book, and one day it just may. But what impresses me about Amanda gets into a new project. She completely immerses herself and becomes an expert in this subject. Did you pay Eric money, or do you think that's a good summation of you?
I can't even remember when he made that recommendation. It was
2013. 2013. There you go. That's when he made the recommendation.
It was very kind and very generous of him.
Well, folks, here's what I'm going to tell you. Take a look at Amanda on Twitter and then go to her About You page. Take a look on LinkedIn. We don't have time to go through everything that you've done in your life. It will make a great movie someday. It will make a great book. But if you don't mind, what you're doing now, let's stick with what you're doing now, which, by the way, is like 5 different things. But let's talk about Curve. What's your role at Curve? When did you join them and why?
So my role at Curve is as the head of North America. My primary function within that is to launch Curve here in the US. And just to level set, we announced that the office is open and that we are coming to the US in February, but we aren't actually in market yet. We should be in beta in the back half of this year, and we have a commercial launch for regular consumers in the first half of next year.
So why? What appealed to you about Curve?
Honestly, I initially came into conversation with Curve under the venture fund that led their B round, Gauss. In conversation with Shahar, who's just a really compelling figure on his own, should definitely talk to him if you've never had the opportunity.
Oh, we will now.
He's very passionate about the product, very passionate about the opportunity. So I actually came into Curve because I knew that this was an opportunity to do something bigger on a much grander scale than that which I'd been able to do on my own to this point, and that the product was just a natural fit for this market.
So let's talk about product fit and market, because that is, to me, that's a tough subject, right? I mean, we've seen, for example, some of the challenger banks from the UK and Europe come over to the US, N26, Monzo, who I just mentioned. This is a different market. I think that's a nice way to say it. I'm being nice and being generous today, but we are consumers, and their habits, right, are a little bit different when it comes to digital adoption than, say, the typical person in the UK or Europe. So what do you see as the opportunity for Curve then here?
I think that Curve is a natural fit for the market because we simply have a lot more payment cards. Like the UK and EEA, they have 1, 2, maybe 3 forms of payment. But here in the US, particularly in metropolitan areas where people have businesses and their own personal cards, there's probably 6 to 7 payment cards that they might have in their wallet. Basically, all Americans are walking around with George Costanza wallets, if they actually have their cards on them. I think more often they end up in a sock drawer because good example is retail-based store cards. 50% of people use them one time, but of the people that have them, 50% have 3 or more. So they all end up in a card drawer somewhere.
I do find it amazing. There are services out there that and I can't remember the name of them, but that will tell you, who you're making payments to, like Hulu, right? It's all this money you could save, and a lot of them usually come back to, at some level, some credit card, right? Some offering that you had. I mean, there are folks that are experts at doing the switch, right? You get all the rewards, you get the bonus points, and they roll the balance over to another one, and so on and so forth. So we do see that happen a lot in the U.S., and we're folks that are in love with credit cards. I mean.
Yes, we are. I love showing the UK-based team the utilization of credit cards in the US by volume.
Yeah. One of my first projects I ever did for TSIS back in the day was in Germany. And it was Royal Bank of Scotland had purchased the Santander consumer commercial portfolio in Germany. So I went over there to talk to them. And we were looking at the average annual spend and balances on the cards in Germany, which back in 2004 was nothing, by the way. It was maybe $1,000. I can't think of it off the top of my head what the average US balance is. I think it's 8,000 now, I think.
Yes, it's north of that, actually.
Oh, good God. Yeah, that's perfect. You look at what's happening in the U.S. right now. You look at, what's happening in the economy, the number of people unemployed, so on and so forth. I haven't seen the numbers for today, by the way. Oh, my God, everybody, I'm sorry. I haven't looked. Normally on Thursday, I tell everybody what the latest unemployment numbers are, and I didn't pay attention.
It's an extra 2 million.
Yeah, that's a safe bet, isn't it? I mean, you're in New York. Where are you at in the city?
So the company is actually headquartered in Brooklyn. I'm physically at the moment in my house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was actually mid-move personally when COVID broke out. And so I didn't sell this house, and I happen to be here running Curve in the US from Amish country.
Oh yeah, Amish country. It's nice. It is Amish country, actually, in Lancaster. I want to touch on this because it means a lot to me. Folks, as you have questions, pop them in. Okay, promise we'll get to them. And by the way, we got folks from France, Nigeria on right now. John Zanoff, Gotham City. John Zanoff is Batman, everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and make that comment right now. Amanda, I do want to touch on this because it means a lot to me. You're like me. You have a little bit of a military background. For those that don't know, I actually did 2 years in the Army, everybody. I went to boot camp in AIT in Fort Benning, Georgia. Amanda, what's my heart?
How did you go from Green to Navy?
I had to either leave the Army and get a real job back in Detroit, and I grew up rather poor. And Detroit in the 80s was not the nicest part of the world. And I had friends that were enlisting in the Navy and getting incredible signing bonuses. So, and I tested really well. So I tested well for the nuke program, and had no clue that I would. And so got offered a ridiculous amount of money to be a nuke on subs and work on submarines. So there you go. It's just to avoid Detroit. Love you, Detroit. Not knocking it. It's a great place. It's my hometown. But damn, I didn't want to go work in a in a factory. You went to the Citadel in Charleston.
Yeah, and in fact, we are co-located with the Nuke School.
Really?
One of the things that, well, the Nuke School was in North Charleston, isn't it?
Yeah.
So?
Yeah, still is.
So pretty much on a Friday or Saturday night in downtown Charleston, you're going to see two types of people in uniform: cadets and Nuke School attendees. So lots of very, very, I think I can say this safely, nerdy Navy folks.
Yes, look at everyone right here. If you want to know what they look like. Imagine me young. It looked like this without gray.
And thicker glasses. I don't think I can say BFGs, but bad glasses.
I had more hair back then. I had almost like an afro, by the way. I was never in regulation. It was the 80s. I used a lot of mousse. But here's one of the things I think that helps you excel as a person in everything you've done. And I'm kissing up a little bit, but it's true. You think about your experience. When did you go to the Citadel? What years?
From 1999 to 2003.
Okay, so to level set for everybody, I lived in Charleston from 86 to like 94, 95. The first female cadet at the Citadel wasn't until 94, 95 year, Shannon Faulkner, that went there. So I mean, we're talking not that long ago, the first female cadet ever to go there. By the way, I don't think Shannon left, right? If I remember, she had death threats to her family, and not necessarily from the Citadel, but from people around for the tradition. So you look at what happened there. A couple of years later, you're going to the Citadel, and you excelled. I mean, you're a multi-sport athlete. You were you just excelled there. I mean, that's a safe thing to say. What do you think changed so much culture-wise?
What changed in the 90s? I would say, honestly, the Citadel, the early experience of women at the Citadel was one of change every year. Every year it got a little bit better. So I was there during the third class of women. The first female graduate was Nancy Mace in 2000. Her classmate, Petra Levitinska, was a senior when I was a knob.
Both badasses, by the way. Both, I'll just flat out say that. Both badasses.
Yep, I completely agree. Every successive year, it got just a little bit better, and mostly built on the difficulties and I would say maturation of the institution as a whole year over year. I think at the end of the day, if you have your hair shaved or close to shaved in the case of females at the time, and you're PTing your butt off, running around downtown Charleston, choosing to do this absolutely insane thing, standing on a parade deck in a fully wool uniform in May in Charleston, South Carolina, it's kind of a level setting thing. It's a very egalitarian experience. I think over time, everyone sort of woke up to that. I actually think that my experience at the Citadel inside the same gate was way better than it was when I was outside in downtown Charleston, meaning the Citadel and the cadets inside, I think because they just experienced you every day, were way more forgiving, way more forward thinking. And I have great friendships that persist today versus downtown Charleston. Being a female cadet in downtown Charleston with a lot of the people who were in Charleston at the time was a much more adversarial experience.
So, and this is why I'm bringing it up for everybody, and I'm glad we talked a little bit about that experience. I love the Citadel. Charleston will always have a place in my heart, as does York, everybody in the UK. Two places I lived that were probably two of my favorites. But Charleston will always have a spot in my heart. I absolutely love Charleston. And to see the transformation happen, one at the Citadel School I really love, to see that happen, and then the after effects, right? The ripple effects of that. So for example, I spent 10 years in submarines. There were no women on submarines when I was on. If you brought that topic up, right, it would have been, yeah, whatever, never going to happen. It happened, people. And guess what? It works fine. Not a damn issue. So let me just get that off my chest. But let me add to that. That's why I think launching Curve in the US, Amanda, okay, you'll kick ass. You'll be able to do it based on your life experiences. I always tell everybody about this with 11FS and any fintech firm I worked with. The good news is we're not going to go to sea on Christmas Eve and go underwater for 6 months, which I've done on multiple occasions, right? The building, well, in this case, your home office is not going to move, right? I mean, I think you'll survive. So it's a little bit about perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. And I honestly, having a lot of friends that continue to serve and are having to make life and death choices every day is a fantastic anchor. because nothing that I do is as serious as choosing whether or not to hit a target or figuring out an evac. It's just not as serious, or not as, it is serious, but it's not that level of seriousness.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that experience at the Citadel, did that also push you on the disaster side of this? Because you do a lot on that space. You're also a certified firefighter, disaster relief. I mean, you got like a million things in that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the commitment to serve, fundamentally, is why I went to the Citadel. I unfortunately did not have an opportunity to pursue a military career, but I channeled that into other avenues that would serve the community ultimately.
Yeah, I'd say you've done a good job, and I wouldn't sweat that. A couple good questions already coming in. I don't want to ignore the folks, because you and I could sit here talk about Charleston for like an hour and do a show. All right, Sunaina, and Sunaina, I said your name right, so I get all kind of credit for that. Sunaina was on our virtual happy hour last night, and we spent 30 minutes me practicing getting that name right. So Sunaina, thumbs up. So as a user, I'm getting bombarded with so many choices, all great in their own standing, and living in New York, like, you know, where you spend a lot of time, Amanda, I put everything on my credit card balance because of the points. I love the idea of Curve, so managing all your cards in one place. How do you anticipate growth adoption in the U.S. market, particularly among the Gen Z population?
Oh, Gen Z is an interesting proposition. So breaking that out into parts, what is very unique about Curve is that you can bundle up all of those cards, even the ones that don't necessarily have a commercial agreement with Apple and Google. We're XPay enabled abroad, which means that the US has something like 6,800 banks, or maybe FDIC insured banks were down to 4,700 or something like that. Most of them allows you to tie up those debit cards that I think were responsible for around a third of your transactions with Google and Apple Pay. It also makes all of the other cards in your wallet that probably are not contactless yet, contactless.
This has really become a big topic. I mean, we had Kush on MasterCard yesterday talking about this, right? We're seeing almost a hockey stick adoption in the U.S. around contactless, and they use it. Basically, no one's using cash right now.
No, and I mean, why would you? I think that, yeah, this is just an accelerant on a trend that was already happening. But the statistics on how the contactless adoption has happened so far are very lackluster, especially compared to the rest of the world. It's just expensive to recard people, period. I think that everyone is going to be demanding it, and for the banks that just don't have the funds to be able to recard their entire user base, things like Google Pay, Apple Pay, and certainly Curve are positioned to be winners.
Yeah, actually, Sidrahar kind of asked that question. I'm glad you went there. He goes, I love the concept of Curve. How do you compete against the Google and Apple and other giants, right? I mean,
we enable them, or we enable your other cards through them.
That's a great answer, isn't it? They're not competitors. You're helping.
Yeah. We work with them cooperatively.
Which is even better, right? I mean, I know you've been there because, you know, you're an advisor for a lot of companies and have started multiple on your own. Whenever you sit down and you're asking these folks in those, you know, even before Series A, when they're trying to raise a seed money, and you're like, who's your competition? And they say Google, Facebook, and you're like, huh, why? Just gotta be honest. Really? That's where you want to start. Congratulations. I don't know if that's where, you know, exactly where I would go with that. I want to ask you, because I've actually gone through this experience with 11FS launching in the US. Ramping up a team, because when you're kind of like first in, it's tough, right? I mean, how do you settle on where to start geographically and where to start, what people you would bring in, what type of roles? So the roles that we were initially hiring for were actually preset because we're hiring for an initial US-based product team. So that was not a lot of work that had to be done. The big job to be done was to figure out where to put the company. So we actually did a pretty thorough city selection search for the first 2 to 3 months. We narrowed it down to 3, Austin, Charlotte, and New York. And there are reasons why we chose New York over the other 2. Austin ended up being another time zone behind, and it just made for a very difficult overlap with a London-based HQ. In addition, there just weren't a lot of flights back and forth to London every day. Charlotte, I can't say enough good things about Charlotte. Charlotte is a fantastic city, a ton of talent, very underrated. It just didn't have the depth of talent at iOS, Android development, and product management positions that we knew would be fundamental for the core product teams. So that brings us back to New York. We were basically like, all right, New York is the logical place to be.
but it's so freaking expensive, and we have a priority on being very capital efficient. So that's why we chose Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the same access to talent, the same very close relationship with all of the partners that we already work with, the best accessibility to London in the country, and a considerable discount. Brooklyn per square foot is around $30, $35 per square foot less, and that was pre-COVID.
You know what's interesting about that? I love Charlotte too, by the way. My last company, consulting firm I worked for, was based right on South Tryon Street, right? Where you've got like Bank of America's headquarters, you got Wells Fargo, Ally, TIA, CREF, you take your pick. I think that's a true statement. We're saying that kind of across the U.S. because I know you know it, right? There's been a flood of people out of New York and San Francisco, this concept of working from home, that talent can be anywhere. But I love the idea of, so I won't be in Manhattan, I'll be in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's so on brand to Curve too. Like Curve as a company, they started in London in a neighborhood called Shoreditch, which is roughly analogous to Brooklyn, as I understand it. And literally from the office in Dumbo, you're sitting there and you're looking into the financial center of the world, but you're standing on the outside. It's incredibly on brand for Curve.
So I'd love to get your perspective on this. I ask everybody who comes on the show this now because it's one of my favorite questions. Coming out of, I shouldn't say coming out of COVID, but the impact of what we're going through with the global pandemic, and what we're seeing, and the tipping point moments we're seeing across the piece. So we've already talked about it, right? We've got contactless, which we've seen an incredible growth on. Folks putting money into the banking system, right? Over $1 million deposited in Q1 across the banks. The adoption of all different types of tools and apps that you can use. What is the one or two things that surprised you the most, or that you think will actually be implemented? Like I mentioned this on every show. I think the restaurant industry is in for a massive shakeup that it wasn't necessarily in for pre-COVID, right? And retail was already all COVID has done in retail is just exposed a lot of major issues, right? I think the restaurant industry is a little bit different. Is there anything you saw that you're like, damn, I didn't see that coming, or I'm not surprised this is happening?
I would say the experience economy in general wasn't something I could have anticipated, or I think most of us could have anticipated that at some point the model for how restaurants work in the US, because they have such razor thin profit margins as is when they have their expected occupancy, that would have to change. But the experience economy was really in acceleration mode, whether you quantify that as travel, actually going to massive events, conferences, whatever your experience of choice was. This is really going to put a damper on that. I'm very interested to see how they rebound from here. On the financial side of house, what's been interesting to watch is high yield savings accounts. High yield savings accounts owned by fintechs have had to come down because of Fed rate cuts to, 30 bips, 29 bips, something like that. But the large incumbents have been able to preserve a much more favorable high yield savings rate. Like I think Marcus is at 1.3%, Citi, Capital One, or somewhere up there too. That's an interesting difference because for a long time the fintechs have been leading that. And I think the biggest surprise so far is that credit scores so far have gone up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was surprised by that. I thought this would have it. We'll probably, let's see what the long tail is. On that, but I think that to me is a fascinating fact that we have seen the scores go up, and it probably does reflect consumer spend behavior right now.
I think everybody's staying highly liquid and they're getting out of whatever debts they can possibly pay off, which is the responsible thing to do. So my hope as a human being is that we do become more financially responsible through this. Yeah.
Great question by Paul Loberman. Hey, Paul. He asked, how have the card issuers reacted to the extension of your go back in time feature? Is there actually a benefits arbitrage issue for some of them?
So far, so good. So that's a feature in our UK and EA based product at the moment. The go back in time feature was initially 14 days. We've actually extended it to 90. That has helped a lot of our existing users to basically make themselves more liquid by being able to reallocate how they spent their cards or how they spent purchases prior to the COVID lockdown on their cards. But so far, so good.
What do you think is going to be, and this was a question from me, what do you think is going to be some of the major differences between the US consumers and the UK consumers? As somebody who lived in the UK and spends a ton of time in the UK like I do, I'll say this for everybody. The most shocking thing for me when I came back to the States in 2010 from living overseas for a while was signing my name when I did a card transaction going, really? And then we instituted chip and sig. What the hell?
Yeah, and I have this dialogue with my UK-based colleagues constantly about the differences here. Like we still have some things that are enabled by a mag stripe, and they're like,
yeah.
The big differences are going to be in the benefit propositions, I think. Some things are going to be exactly the same, but a lot of things are just different. LFX fees just isn't that compelling to a US-based audience because we don't tend to travel as often as they do in the UK. So we're going to have to pivot around that. The real value prop for Curve, in addition to tying up all your cards in one, is being able to stack rewards atop rewards. The US-based consumer is much more accustomed to getting rewards and to optimizing towards those rewards than the UK and EEA-based consumer. So that's an opportunity for us to be really creative and innovative. It's just, there are a lot of little nuancy things to it as well. The way that we pay for things at a restaurant is fundamentally different. When they brought a point of sale terminal to my table the first time, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Here's my card.
And again, we're talking about that restaurant behavior. One of the first things when I first started traveling overseas quite a bit, whether it be the UK and Europe, the concept that you need to ask for the check, right? You can just sit there all damn night, which I love, by the way, and talk, and you're good to go. If you're an American, your first time overseas, you're like, are they ever going to bring me the damn check? You have to ask people.
Yep.
And it's a good thing because conversations are what matters. I 100% agree with you. Ron Shevlin, a good friend of mine, a good writer for Forbes, he talks about this a lot of times. If you're thinking you're going to come to the US and just launch on the great service and the look of your app, you're crazy. It's not going to work. You have to actually have a value prop that makes sense. So you better damn well understand the audience that you're going after. Folks, believe it or not, we're out of time. Damn, this flies by. Amanda, thanks for joining. Where's the best place for people to find out one about you? And go ahead. I want you to brag. What's your website, Amanda? Oh, come on, tell me what it is. AmandaOrson.com, or what is it again?
Yeah, it's AmandaOrson.com. It's a blog I haven't maintained in many, many years.
Get out there. Come on.
I haven't done anything on it probably in 5 or more years. But you can read about me there. I'm probably most accessible on Twitter.
Yep.
You can find me at Amanda Orson. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Curve is accessible now via curve.com. And we have a US waiting list that can be found at curve.com/US.
All right. You're already trendy because you have a waiting list. Get on it, people. It's worth it. The folks in the UK will tell you it's a great product. All right, everybody, thanks for joining. Tomorrow, I'm joined by one of the OGs of US fintech, and that is an original gangster, Shamir Karkle. I love Shamir. Shamir is actually one of the original founders of Simple, and there'll be a lot of cussing tomorrow. So just going to warn you, that's what Shamir's like. Again, if you know someone who'd be perfect to come on the show, don't hesitate to reach out to me at Sam Maule or at podcast@11fs.com. Everybody have a great day. Go look up Curve, go look up Amanda, and we'll see you tomorrow.